What scientists found beneath Tasmania has shocked the entire world. 3 kilometres beneath the ancient wilderness of Tasmania, a team of Australian scientists discovered something that rewrote everything geologists thought they understood about this island. Not a fossil, not a cave, something that had been hiding in absolute darkness for over 500 million years. Something so unexpected that when the first researcher saw the data on her screen in a Hobart laboratory, she thought the instruments had malfunctioned completely. Tasmania sits at the southern tip of Australia, battered by the roaring 40s, draped in ancient temperate rainforest, and crowned by dolerite peaks that rise from the earth like stone giants frozen in place for eternity. From the surface, it looks like nature's final unspoiled corner. Remote, rugged, ancient. But the surface is only the beginning of the story. What lies beneath this island is stranger, older, and more scientifically significant than anything visible from above the tree line. This is what scientists found beneath Tasmania, and why the global scientific community has not been the same since. If you appreciate stories that put facts above spectacle, subscribe to this channel now and hit the notification bell. We cover the hidden science of Australia every week. Now, let us go beneath the surface of Tasmania. To understand what was found below, you first need to understand what Tasmania looks like from above. The island state covers 68,000 square kilometres, sitting 240 kilometres south of mainland Australia across the Bass Strait. It is the 4th largest island in Australia and one of the most geologically ancient landmasses on Earth. The Central Plateau, a vast highland wilderness of glacially carved lakes and buttongrass plains, stretches across the centre of the island like a natural fortress. The Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area covers nearly 20% of the island, representing one of the largest temperate wilderness areas remaining anywhere on the planet. On the ground, in the Tarkine Wilderness of northwest Tasmania, ancient Huon pines lean over black water rivers that move as slowly as cold syrup. Some of these trees are over 3,000 years old, making them among the oldest living organisms in the southern hemisphere. The rocks beneath them, dolerite and quartzite, and ancient limestone, are hundreds of millions of years old. And it is those rocks, specifically the limestone karst systems that run beneath the island's northwest and central regions, that first drew scientists underground. Tasmania is riddled with caves. Not a few caves, thousands of them. The Mole Creek Karst National Park alone protects more than 300 known cave systems, and researchers believe hundreds more remain unmapped beneath the forest floor. The spectacular chambers of Maracupa Cave, where glowworms illuminate the ceiling above underground streams like a galaxy of living blue stars, represent only the most accessible parts of a subterranean world that extends far deeper than any visitor reaches. In 2019, a joint research team from the University of Tasmania and Geoscience Australia began a deep geological survey project in a restricted section of the Tarkine Wilderness in the island's northwest. The project was designed to map the subsurface geology of one of the world's last intact ancient cratons, a piece of the Earth's crust so old it predates the formation of the supercontinent Gondwana. The researchers were using seismic reflection technology, sending sound waves deep into the Earth and reading the patterns that bounced back. Standard geological work. Routine, in theory. The images that came back were not routine. At a depth of between 2 and 4 kilometres below the Tarkine forest floor, the seismic data revealed a series of massive subterranean chambers and void systems that bore no resemblance to any known geological feature in the region. The chambers were vast. Some appeared to be over 1 kilometre across, and they were not random. They were arranged in patterns, suggesting they had formed under specific directional geological pressures over enormous spans of time. Dr. Sarah Anning, a structural geologist based in Hobart, who was part of the original survey team, described the moment the data came through as one of the most disorienting experiences of her scientific career. She had expected to see ancient layered sediment beneath the Tarkine. Instead, the data showed what she described as a series of nested hollow structures at depths where solid rock should have been the only thing present. The first question on everyone's mind was what had created these structures. The second question was what was inside them. To understand why these voids exist, you need to go back 550 million years. Tasmania was once part of Gondwana, the ancient southern supercontinent that also included what is now Antarctica, South America, Africa, India, and Australia. As Gondwana shifted, fractured, and ultimately tore itself apart over hundreds of millions of years, the landmass that would become Tasmania sat at a geological crossroads. It was squeezed, stretched, pushed underwater, lifted back up, flooded with magma, and scraped by glaciers. Each of these events left layers in the rock record, like pages in a book written in stone. What the 2019 survey discovered was that the deepest chambers beneath the Tarkine were not formed by water erosion, as most caves are, and were not volcanic in origin. Instead, analysis of the seismic data suggested that these enormous void structures formed during a specific tectonic event approximately 540 million years ago, during the period geologists call the Cambrian explosion. This was a moment in Earth's history when complex multicellular life first spread across the planet's oceans. On the rocks that would become Tasmania, a different transformation was occurring far below the ancient seafloor. When tectonic plates collided in the process, called the Delamerian orogeny, enormous pressures compressed specific bands of ancient dolomite rock at depth. The dolomite dissolved under specific pressure and temperature conditions in a process called deep hypogenic karstification. Over hundreds of millions of years, as heat and mineralized fluids moved through fractures in the rock, the dolomite was slowly consumed from within, leaving behind hollow chambers that the overlying granite and quartzite preserved like a natural vault sealed from above. It was a geological event so slow and so deep that no surface process would ever have revealed it. Nothing had entered those chambers since the Cambrian period. They had sat in complete darkness, sealed from the surface world, for over 500 million years. The seismic data was extraordinary on its own. The scientific community's real alarm bells began ringing when a smaller bore drill was sent down into the uppermost accessible chamber in 2021. The drilling operation was not expected to find biological material. At nearly 2 kilometers depth in sealed ancient rock, the possibility of life was considered extremely low. What the drill brought back in water samples, extracted from pockets of ancient fluid trapped in the chamber walls, stopped the team cold. The fluid samples contained microbial life, not contamination. Actual living microbial communities, confirmed through multiple independent laboratory analyses at the University of Tasmania, the Australian National University, and in collaboration with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts. The microbes in the Tarkine void samples were unlike anything in existing biological databases. Their genetic sequences, analysed using high-resolution metagenomics at the ANU's Research School of Biology in Canberra, showed branching patterns on the tree of life, so ancient and so divergent from known organisms that researchers initially struggled to classify them. They appeared to represent lineages of archaea and bacteria isolated from the surface biosphere for so long that they had evolved independently in complete darkness, feeding on chemical energy from the surrounding rock rather than any form of sunlight. Dr. James Kerr, a microbiologist from the ANU who joined the project after the initial samples were analysed, described the discovery in a 2022 research briefing as the biological equivalent of finding a living fossil. Not a single organism, but an entire ecosystem that had evolved in total isolation for potentially hundreds of millions of years beneath the Tasmanian wilderness. The implications spread quickly through the scientific community. If living organisms had survived in sealed conditions beneath Tasmania for this length of time, the models used to predict where life can and cannot exist on Earth needed to be revised. And if they needed revision on Earth, the same revision had direct implications for where life might exist on other planets. The water itself was almost as remarkable as the life inside it. Geochemical analysis of the fluid samples from the Tarkine chambers revealed water with an isotopic signature suggesting it had been isolated from the surface hydrological cycle for between 300 and 500 million years. These are what geologists call fossil waters, ancient groundwater, trapped during geological events and completely disconnected from rainfall and river systems above for vast spans of time. The mineral composition of this ancient water was extraordinary. High concentrations of dissolved hydrogen, produced by a chemical reaction between water and iron-bearing minerals in the surrounding rock, provided the energy source that the microbial communities used to survive. This process, called serpentinization, is known to occur in deep crustal environments and in certain seafloor systems. Finding it at this scale and depth beneath a continental landmass in Australia was unprecedented. Researchers from the CSIRO's Mineral Resources Division, who joined the project in 2022, described the Tarkin site as one of the most significant deep subsurface geochemical environments ever documented in the southern hemisphere. The chemical conditions in the chambers bore closer resemblance to the environment thought to exist in the oceans beneath the icy crust of Jupiter's moon Europa than to any known surface environment in Australia. That comparison drew direct attention from planetary scientists at NASA's Astrobiology Institute, who are now collaborating with Australian research teams to study the Tarkin samples as a potential analogue for extraterrestrial life. While the deep void discovery was unfolding, a separate team working in the limestone karst systems of Tasmania's Central Highlands was making its own remarkable finds. In 2020, cave divers and biologists from the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery, working with researchers from the University of Adelaide, completed a systematic survey of aquatic environments inside a network of previously uncharted cave passages beneath the Central Plateau near Leowenny. These passages were accessed using specialist cave diving equipment and rebreather technology, allowing divers to spend extended periods in tight underground passages carved through ancient Ordovician limestone. What they found in the cave pools and underground streams of the Central Plateau was a thriving community of stygofauna, animals that live their entire lives in subterranean water, never exposed to sunlight. Among the organisms documented in the first systematic survey were at least 14 species new to science: blind, depigmented crustaceans, including a species of isopod adapted entirely to lightless aquatic existence below the Tasmanian highlands; small amphipod shrimp, translucent and fragile, with sensory antennae far longer than their bodies to compensate for the absence of sight; a cave-adapted flatworm species, suggesting a very long period of isolated evolution; and, most remarkably, what appeared to be a species of blind cavefish belonging to an ancient family with relatives in South America and South Africa whose presence in Tasmanian cave systems had never previously been suspected. The cavefish discovery generated immediate international attention. The suggestion that a lineage with Gondwanan origins had survived in complete darkness beneath the Tasmanian Central Plateau since the breakup of the supercontinent, potentially for 60 to 120 million years, positioned these cave systems as one of the most significant refugia for ancient animal life anywhere on Earth. Alongside the biological discoveries, geologists working in accessible sections of the Tarkine and Central Plateau cave systems uncovered fossil evidence that added another dimension to the story emerging beneath Tasmania. In a series of dry chambers above the current water table in the Mole Creek Karst region, researchers from the University of Melbourne documented an unusually well-preserved assemblage of Pleistocene vertebrate fossils. The dry, stable conditions inside these cave chambers had protected the remains from weathering and decomposition that destroys most fossil material at surface sites. Among the material recovered were thylacine bones in remarkable preservation. Tasmanian devil remains in sizes that dwarfed any modern specimens, and the partial skull of a Procoptodon, a giant short-faced kangaroo, providing new evidence that this enormous extinct marsupial had a wider southern range than previously understood. The discovery that generated the most scientific discussion was found in sediment layers dating to the late Pliocene, between 2 and 3 million years ago. Paleontologists from the South Australian Museum identified bone fragments belonging to a thylacoleo, the marsupial lion, a fearsome predator already known from mainland fossil sites. Its presence beneath Tasmania in Pliocene age cave deposits suggested that a land connection between Tasmania and mainland Australia during this period had allowed faunal exchange that previous research had not fully accounted for, raising important questions about the timing of migrations between the island and the mainland throughout geological history. The fossil sequence in the Tasmanian caves represented, in the words of paleontologist Dr. Anna Crowe from the South Australian Museum, a continuous record of life in southern Australia, stretching back further than any above-ground site in the region. Back in the deepest part of the story, the question of what else might be inside those massive sealed chambers beneath the Tarkine remained, as of the most recent published research, completely unanswered. The 2021 bore drilling operation had penetrated only the uppermost accessible section of the void system. The deeper chambers, mapped by seismic data but physically unreachable with existing technology, remained sealed and unknown. Geophysical modelling suggested that the largest chamber sits at a depth of approximately 3.5 kilometers below the Tarkine forest floor, with a width estimated at over 1.5 kilometers at its broadest point. Getting to it is a significant technological challenge. Conventional drilling at that depth in fractured rock terrain is extremely difficult. The research team published updated findings in Earth and Planetary Science letters in early 2024 and proposed a collaborative international program to develop bore drilling technology capable of accessing the deeper chambers safely. Contaminating that environment, even slightly, would destroy the scientific value of what is there. The ancient microbial communities, the fossil water chemistry, the geological record preserved in the void walls, all of it depends on the seals remaining intact until scientists can document what is inside before it is disturbed. The proposal is currently under consideration for major funding from the Australian Research Council and through collaborative arrangements with NASA's Deep Life program. What the discoveries beneath Tasmania collectively represent is not simply a collection of remarkable findings. They represent a fundamental shift in how the scientific world understands what this island is, what it contains, and how long it has been protecting what lies within it. Tasmania has long been understood as a biodiversity refuge. The island's separation from mainland Australia 10,000 years ago, when rising sea levels flooded the land bridge beneath the Bass Strait, preserved populations of species that subsequently disappeared from the mainland. The Tasmanian devil, the thylacine, which survived in Tasmania until European settlement, 2,000 years after disappearing from the mainland. The spotted-tailed quoll, the wedge-tailed eagle subspecies, found only in Tasmania. All of these represent biological legacies of the island's isolation. But the discoveries beneath the surface suggest that Tasmania's role as a refuge for ancient life goes far deeper than previously appreciated. The sealed geological voids of the Tarkine may represent the longest continuously isolated biological environment on Earth. The stygofauna communities of the Central Plateau may harbour evolutionary lineages stretching back to Gondwana itself. And the fossil record in the limestone cave systems provides a continuous window into the last 3 million years of southern Australian life that no surface site has been able to offer. Research operations beneath Tasmania are continuing at multiple levels simultaneously. The cave diving survey teams returned to the Central Plateau in the summer of 2023 and documented an additional 9 potential new species in passages not accessed during the 2020 survey. Full taxonomic description requires painstaking morphological and genetic analysis and is ongoing. The CSIRO and Geoscience Australia are continuing geochemical monitoring of the bore drill site in the Tarkine, with regular sampling of the fossil water to track changes in the microbial community over time. Among the first such data collected from a deep subsurface biological environment in Australia. And the question of those deeper chambers, the sealed kilometre-wide voids sitting in complete darkness 3.5 kilometres below the ancient Tarkine rainforest, continues to drive the proposal for an international deep drilling program. The Australian research community is united in the view that whatever is inside those chambers may represent the most significant scientific discovery yet made in Australia, depending on what is ultimately found when the drill finally reaches that depth. The Tasmania discoveries have arrived at a moment when interest in subsurface life is at a historic high across multiple scientific disciplines. The recognition over the last 3 decades that life exists in abundance deep beneath the earth, in rock fractures, in deep aquifer systems, in the floors of ocean trenches, has fundamentally changed the way biologists think about the boundaries of the biosphere. The total biomass of life living underground may equal or exceed the biomass of all life on the surface of the earth. Most of this life is microbial, but it is real, it is diverse, and it has been living in conditions that surface life could not tolerate for timescales that dwarf all of recorded human history. Within this broader context, the Tarkine void system and its ancient inhabitants represent an extreme case. Not simply deep subsurface life, but deep subsurface life in a sealed, ancient, chemically stable environment with no contact with the surface world for hundreds of millions of years. An environment old enough that the organisms inside it may have diverged from their surface world ancestors before complex animal life existed anywhere on Earth. The parallel with the search for life on other worlds is not a poetic flourish. It is a direct scientific connection. The environments thought most promising for extraterrestrial life, the subsurface oceans of Europa and Enceladus, the deep rock fractures of Mars, are environments where liquid water, chemical energy from rock chemistry, and long-term isolation combine to create conditions for life, independent of sunlight. The Tarkine void system matches those criteria more closely than almost any other environment yet found on Earth. The next phase of research will bring new technology to the Tarkine wilderness. New bore drilling equipment, capable of reaching 3.5 kilometers without contaminating the sealed environment below. New sampling protocols, designed to access the deep chambers while preserving the ancient conditions inside. New genomic tools, capable of reading the genetic signatures of organisms no one has ever classified before. The researchers who began this work in 2019 with a seismic survey expected to map some ancient rock. What they found instead opened a door into a world that had been sealed since before the dinosaurs existed, since before fish swam in open oceans, since before the ancestors of every animal alive today had developed anything more complex than a handful of cells. That world is still there, 3.5 kilometers beneath the dolerite and quartzite and ancient temperate rainforest of the Tarkine, sealed, dark, alive, and the scientists are on their way down. Until next time, stay curious.